Welcome to Pivot2First. Hi, I'm Mike Seidel. I'm the CTO at Pivot2CX. Every day I get to work with some of the brightest minds in the industry with one goal, turning hiring and people strategy into a competitive advantage. Hi, today I'm joined by Dominic Antonio. I'm really excited to have Dominic on. Dominic is actually our manager of advertising operations here at Pivot2CX. And Dominic every day gets to work with all of our customers and helps our customers that need advertising help on Indeed, ZipRecruiter, and other platforms really get the most out of their ad spend. And I'm really looking forward to this conversation because right now it's really, really hard to find people out there. And a lot of people really make a big set of mistakes right away when it comes to job advertising. So Dominic, welcome. I'm so glad to have you here. I know you and I have been working for like 4 years together. So
Yeah, thanks,
welcome.
Mike, thanks for the introduction. Thanks for the welcome. I'm definitely excited to talk about recruitment advertising. We live it day in, day out. There's so many customers that we're helping out with, and I would like to begin this off by just saying there's so much low-hanging fruit, you could say, in the world of recruitment advertising. Simple things people can keep in mind when they're advertising on job boards. I'm sure we're going to talk a lot about, especially Indeed today. But there are so many little things that, every recruiter could learn.
Just to kind of kick things off, one of the things that always is amazing to me, and I'm back there building the product, and I come out once in a while and I look at what's going on with customers, job ads, and I look at the ads. How much of a difference is there between a job description that you use in-house to describe what the functions of a job is and what a job ad that you post on Indeed? What difference is there?
There is definitely a difference. And actually, the first time I learned about this difference between job description and job ad was from a very different place than recruiting. We were actually doing a project with a bunch of students from university in Toronto or something, and I was helping them out with putting together like a recruitment project. I was like the business advisor, so to say, to these students. And the professors, you would always like nail it into the students' head that, remember, it's not job descriptions, it are job ads. Job ads are not job descriptions. It's like, you know what? She actually knows more about recruiting than most recruiters. And that's probably why she's a professor of business there at that school. Because when you're writing out these, when the students were writing out these job ads, they looked like regular job descriptions. They're very straightforward. These are the requirements. This is what you need. It's very focused on screening out and sort of saying like, this is the ideal candidate. And what job descriptions fail to do is they fail to sell, which is what we try to focus on with job ads. You have to sell candidates.
Absolutely. So and we see this all the time. And I know I've snuck over to your desk more than once where I've came over and go, hey, Dominic, take a look at this ad. It describes the perfect candidate. It describes them and it describes all the requirements. But the one thing it doesn't do is anything to attract that candidate.
Yeah, no, you hit the nail on the head there. It's like if no one goes out dating saying this is like the perfect person. Now let me go find this perfect person. But rather, okay, who do I have to work with and how can I attract people? How can I, in the world of recruiting, that is, like, how can I get people at least in the door? What's going to make them click? So it's like a lot of marketing mentality for sure needs to go in recruiting. And that's definitely spurred on by the fact that we're in a candidate market, not so much an employer's market anymore.
Yeah, that is a big change, and it's something that makes those job ads so much more important because it's hyper competitive out there, and if your copy in that job ad doesn't grab people's attention, it doesn't matter if you put it on Indeed or ZipRecruiter, it just isn't going to work, right?
No, it's not just a job copy either. You're looking at job titles; they're become much more relevant. You're looking at badges, for example, on job boards. Job boards often like to put badges on jobs to say, this is easy to apply. This is a remote position. This is a responsive employer, for example. And those are all things that, employers might not think of as right away. But when I would go in and, for example, and mimic the job seeker experience, those are the things that jump out right away. Those little badges, the first sentence, what the title says, for titles, for example, we find a huge difference between saying like an entry level position versus like an experienced position, or using very niche names that no one's ever heard of, like this electronic technician, assembler, maintenance technician, or something for this one job title that no one knows. No one's going to be looking for that. Kind of have to play the SEO game there. That's just some
Yeah,
thoughts on that.
that brings me to a couple things. So a job ad, it has two audiences, right? It's one audience is the job seeker and making it so we're attracting the person to actually apply, right? And the other audience for that job ad is actually the job board search engine.
I never thought about that way, but yes, that totally makes sense because when I look at Indeed, for example, and you're putting your jobs out there, I'll take one example from a client just from this week. So this is fresh. We did the test. We had field operations technician. Now that's a very generic name. We weren't getting many applies. We had only one qualified candidate in a week or so. And we said, okay, let's take this, let's break it down to what this position actually is, and then let's put some words in it that people are actually looking for. So then once we learned more about the position by talking with the client, we learned that, okay, it is technically an oil purification technician. That's what they're working with. They're working with oil. So we put that in the job title. Next week, we got 9 qualified candidates. And that was the only thing we changed was that job title. It's like, okay, field operations technician, that sounds really vague. None of those things tells me what this job is doing. But if I have experience in the oil industry and I'm in Texas, hey, I'm going to be looking up those keywords.
I'm really glad that you got a big result out of that because it definitely helps the client out. But one thing that's really important about what you just said is, in those job titles, you really, should you be using your internal job title, or should you go ahead and figure out what people who actually match up with those requirements, what they're going to look for?
Yeah, I have no I do not hesitate talking with clients about, let's change up this job title if it's not getting clicks, or if like even I don't understand what that job title actually is. Or one of them, for example, is like research and design engineer. And all that we were looking for was just a design engineer, not necessarily research and development. That sounds like you're in some academic setting or something. So we took that off and said, hey, we start getting more applies. Another one was like a painter assistant. Now, it sounds like if a painter assistant needs to have experience painting, like they're going to be doing painting work. But when we learned about the job, it's actually he's an assistant to the painter. He's just like carrying things and carrying tools to and fro, one location to the other. It's like, oh, that's like an entry level labor position or something like that. So yes, definitely helps.
I remember one a long time ago that we had that was it was like a field, like it was what was it? It was an environmental remediation manager position.
Yes.
And that was a position where like you were expected to go out in the field with big rubber boots on and go supervise things, like people actually digging in the dirt and stuff. And people would see that job, and the people that were applying thought that they were going to work in an office and move data around on a spreadsheet.
Yeah. Yes, I do remember that. It's like, and that's maybe HR trying to spice up the position a little. It's like janitors, for example, all of a sudden start getting the job title like environmental maintenance or something like that. I remember seeing that on one of our clients. It's like, okay, that sounds great and everything, but that I'm an environmental technician and not a janitor. But as far as the job boards go, that's what people are looking for. So it's like job title is just like one thing. We talked about job title. We talked about labels on jobs. Another thing we can always talk about, I know you like to always bring up like the first paragraph. What's your first sentence on your job description or your job ad? And because that's what people are going to read, honestly.
So I think people, when they read a job ad, that first paragraph, that's where they make the decision, am I going to apply or not? And it's amazing how many job ads we see come in here from new clients that start with, our company was founded in 1822. Yes. And
they give the history of the company.
Yeah, it's like all about me and my company, and not about you, the person that I want to recruit.
It's like not about you and why you would want to apply to this position. And that could be, you could highlight whatever one of the main benefits of that position. You could say like, oh, there's an entry level position, but we're willing to train you to become something else, or for example, to be successful in this role. Rather, that's going to work a lot better rather than what we see on many job ads, job descriptions, which is the person in this role will be successful if they do A, B, C, D, E, F, G, and it's like a whole list of things, which honestly are just like preferences from the hiring manager and not even real requirements.
So let's really get into the meat of this thing, which really is we're going to talk a little bit about Indeed, and I'm going to start off with a question that I think everybody asks, because almost everybody, if you're hiring, you probably have ads out in Indeed. It is easily the number one job board, and it is really, if you look at the entire recruitment marketing space, the number one source of applicants. So if I'm looking at Indeed, one thing that's always been remarkable to me is when you onboard a new client, the one thing they don't know is how they should spend on Indeed. How do you figure that out?
How do you spend on Indeed? I like to always say, let's keep the goal in mind. So what are you looking at to hire? And then you go from your hires and you build down from there. And it's very important to understand that funnel from hire from apply. So in between, there are a lot of little steps. And it's important to understand the conversion metrics for those steps. So for example, for every hire, how many people you're interviewing? Okay, I might interview 4 to 6 people. Out of those people interviewing, how many qualified candidates do you need to present to the hiring manager to get an interview? Let's say I need 10 to 20 candidates. 20 candidates in order to get 6 good interviews. Out of those 20 good candidates, how many applies are you going to need? Well, I'm going to need another 40, 60, 80 applies, because I know people are going to drop off. People are going to apply. They're not qualified. So at that point, you've gone from 2 hires to 80 applies. You take your 80 applies.
So 80 applies you got to get, right? So I've got 80 of those, and then Indeed doesn't really sell you applies, they sell you clicks, right? So you've got to make one more calculation.
That's the hardest calculation, because you're never quite sure. You're kind of playing a bit of a gambling game sometimes. You cannot we're an agency with Indeed, Pivot2First is an agency with Indeed, so we can get some market data on what's the going cost per apply for this position, for this area, for example. Many employers are not going to have access to that sort of data unless they actually ran the campaigns. So on a side note, that's a big advantage we have as an agency, I would say for sure. Is that
I think what you're saying, Dominic, I think you're bringing up a really important point, which is, if you're self-service buying job ads on Indeed or other job boards, there is a whole world of data that, unless you're a really, really big spender, I'm talking about, $50,000 a month, you don't have access to all the decision-making data that a recruitment marketing agency will have. When you go in and we bring on a new client and you have Indeed pull the numbers, we always find out some really amazing things when we look at like company X's Indeed spend. It starts with, they thought they were spending $6,000, but they were really spending $13,000. And the reason why was, yeah, sure, HR was spending $6,000 on recruiting, but every plant location around the U.S.
Yeah, they all had their own credit card.
Registered with their credit card.
Yeah,
and then
that's another thing. That's a whole nother point we could bring up is, how to centralize your Indeed spend, so to say. It's why that's important, because if you're just a recruiter with your credit card, you're going to advertise for 20 job applies. Your data set on understanding that position is your 20 job applies. And that's you can't do much research out of that, your own little data set. But if you centralize it, then we can look across all locations, all jobs. You can shift your budget from where it needs to go to different jobs. And, it's an economy of scale type issue.
So if I'm out there and I'm spending money on Indeed, let's say I'm spending a couple $1,000s a month, I think it's probably, if you're just buying $1,000 a month worth of Indeed ads, there's probably not much an agency is going to be able to do for you. But $2,000-3,000 a month, you're probably in the zone where it makes sense. What really what's the big difference between an agency helping you with Indeed and doing it yourself?
Doing it yourself, you're gonna make mistakes. That's for sure. Because we've talked to clients before, and we would ask them about their Indeed spend, how many jobs they're advertising, and they never know really. They know, oh, we spent like $500 last month. It's very, I would say, impulsive buying. It's like, oh, this hiring manager is getting on my back, so let's go spend $500 in the credit card, see what happens, because you feel like you're being pressured. That's why I always like to advocate, make sure you have a budget set aside for your recruitment advertising. That's for some clients, that's like, a step forward for sure. That's one difference. Yeah.
Yeah. One thing that we saw, you and I have seen many times is we'll work with a client that's been buying their own Indeed ads, and then we'll go work with Indeed. And one of the nice things about having that agency relationship is we're able to go work with the same team at Indeed that's doing huge buys for huge companies. Mm-hmm. And they'll come back with a report that shows us a couple of things that you just don't get if you're on your own on Indeed. One is in every local market that you're in, they'll tell you exactly what the bid levels are to get the number of candidates that you want to get. So it's, in a lot of ways, you go from kind of flying blind on Indeed to almost cheating.
Yes. I mean, it definitely helps when you know what your CPA is. Obviously, if you, Indeed, it sells on CPC, your cost per click, and that's what you can control. But your CPA is always going to be a bit different. It could be $20, it could be $60, it could be over $100. At that point, you might not even have a job market if it's that high. But definitely, it's like if you know that this position has been getting $25 CPA for the past 2 months, and then all of a sudden there's a new opening, where you can make the calculation pretty quickly and say, okay, this is how much budget we need to put on this job. Because that happens a lot for sure. Client, they come up with new positions and they say, okay, how much money should I put on Indeed? Should I just put on what feels comfortable? And we've seen that a lot for sure. So right where the clients.
Well, I think a lot of times we have I think the rule of thumb has been with clients when they're doing it, kind of doing it by what's comfortable. They're either too low or way too high, and rarely right where they need to be. And the funny thing is we can just ask Indeed and go, hey, Indeed, what do we need? If I'm looking for warehouse associates in Las Vegas, Nevada, what's that market look like? What do the competitive bids look like? What is the candidate count that's available in that market? So that I understand, I can make some decisions and go, okay, you need 200 candidates. Okay, how much does it cost to get 200 people? And
be realistic with the cost. Yeah, be realistic with the cost as well. Most employers, I would say, are underspending, either because they just don't realize that to get many applicants, it really does cost money in this job market.
Well, especially for hyper competitive job titles, if you're talking about nurses or you're talking about truck drivers and that kind of thing, mm-hmm. You really do need to know what the market rates are. Otherwise, you can bid all day and you'll get 5 or 6 apply. You'll get a few apply, trickle in, but you're not going to get, this big flood of candidates that you were expecting, right?
Yeah, you could throw $1,000 at your job and think, oh, that was good day's work. But then you have other competitors, they're spending, 8 to 10K easily on the same positions. And so, your bids aren't going to do much. That's
a little $500 spend isn't going to go anywhere.
Yeah, at that point, you might as well just keep to your organic postings.
Yeah, which leads to something kind of interesting, because once in a while this happens. Like we hire a lot of people to be on our chat team, and sometimes there are jobs where there's a huge abundance of candidates. There are job titles, and there are things where we can advertise adjacent to the job title. So for our people that are on our chat team, we call them candidate development reps. And what they really are is that they're recruiters that specialize in what happens between a job application and an interview. So they're not doing like this full spectrum recruiting thing where they're presenting candidates to the hiring manager and all that. They're doing the top part of that, the top part of the recruiting funnel. Yeah. And so instead of that, we used to advertise for call center people, and we made a shift to recruiting for junior recruiters. Mm-hmm. And amazingly, there was a ton of organic traffic.
Yeah. I remember even when we were advertising that software developer position, we got all the candidates just off organic traffic. And that's another thing, like just bringing it, since we brought up the topic of organic traffic, that's one thing employers and even me at the beginning, have a hard time understanding, which is organic versus sponsored traffic on Indeed and some of these job boards. So the rule of thumb, and this is like really getting down to the meat of job board advertising, is there can only be one source of truth, but there can be as many opinions as you want. In other words, you only get one source of truth for free, and you can pay for as many opinions as you want. And what that means, in Indeed speak, so to say, is that you can have one organic job, and then if you want to do duplicates of that job, they only get visibility if they're sponsored. So, for example, if you have 10 openings, you put your 10 openings on Indeed. If you're the only company on Indeed, if you represent those 10 positions and you're the hiring manager, you're the hiring employer, then you can get, organic visibility and everything. Now, let's say if your other recruiter wants to go and post those same positions with their credit card or something on another Indeed account, then technically their jobs are in conflict with yours because now you have a duplication thing going. So their jobs aren't going to get any organic visibility. Only if they pay money on it are they going to get that sponsored visibility. And so that's another thing where you can be really hindering your own efforts when you're running 4 or 5 different Indeed accounts. They're all trying to advertise the same job or something, or the same location for sure. Is that you're conflicting with like, okay, which ones are getting organic, which ones are getting sponsored, and there could be jobs that have been taken down by Indeed or like struck down by their quality team. They're a very rigorous quality team, as we know, because there's that duplication going on.
So, okay, so we brought this up twice, I think, like managers out there in the field that are just kind of posting jobs with their credit card. Mm-hmm. It has a big impact, right? How do you get control of that? How is it, if my company, I've got 18 locations and I'm pretty sure I got 18 Indeed spends going on. What do I do about it?
Well, you got to get, put reins around the horses here and rein in the spending for sure. Get in touch with your Indeed account manager. For us, we, as an agency, what we do is we get written permission from the client. Then we go to our Indeed account agency rep. We collect okay, who are all the people spending on this account, so to say. And it could be like one client, it was like 3 to 4 different Indeed accounts were spending money to post jobs on behalf of this one company. And so we say, okay, we got these people all posting jobs. Let's centralize that. So they don't have to post jobs anymore. They just send the jobs to a central person. They get the jobs posted out. That way you can control your organic visibility. You can control your budget, and you're not handling 4 different expense reports, but rather one, focused budget.
Well, the other thing that goes with this too is that you don't have a bunch of random different job descriptions out there and a bunch of different job ads. And that I've seen be a compliance problem for things like EEOC and OFCCP. A lot of times the people out in the field don't know what the compliance rules are. They're really well-intentioned. They're trying to make a good hire. Mm-hmm. They get something wrong in the ad, and that opens a Pandora's box. Yeah. So, having some level of management of your Indeed advertising and centralizing that really makes a lot of sense from a compliance standpoint too. But, one of the things that always blows me away when you do this, and we do this, I don't know, probably twice a month, where we'll have a client come in and you go ahead and have Indeed pull the numbers and go back to the client with a report on here's what you're spending on Indeed, here's what you're getting out of it. They always seem to be really amazed that they were spending a lot more money across their whole company than they thought they were.
Yes. Okay. So case in point, one client we had, that was a few years ago, so I guess we can talk about it already. But they actually, so they signed on with us, and we started advertising the first month, and they was like, oh my God, it's so expensive for not getting as many applies as we used to. And so we went in and we went in with our Indeed rep. We looked at what was their last month of advertising before we came in, and we compared that to what they're currently spending. And it was like the same amount. They had the exact same CPA. What they were looking at was they conflated the CPA with their CPC before. So they thought, oh, it's a $20 CPA. But before we had a $3 CPA. Like, no, you had a $3 CPC. So
okay, that brings up a really big thing. So there's a couple things most people don't understand about Indeed. Yeah. One of the ones that always is there is CPA versus CPC. What's the difference here?
Okay, so CPC is cost per click, and that's when you're bidding with your job to show up in the feed. Then let's say you spent $3 for someone to click onto your position. Now, when Indeed is only going to hold themselves accountable to that, to the click. They're obviously not going to hold themselves accountable to the apply. They got rid of the whole.
And they're definitely not going to hold themselves accountable to anything that happens after the apply.
Click. Yeah, nothing like that, and that kind of makes sense, because someone could click on a job, but it's not a very good job or something, it doesn't pay well or something, and then that person's not going to go through with the apply. So if you ask, Indeed is like, hey, so many people are clicking on my job, but no one's actually applying, they're going to go by the script and say, well, make sure you show your benefits, make sure your company page is updated. And by the way, we have these other products you could buy. That's when they start selling you products and stuff. But there are some things you can do to help increase your click-through rate, which is make your job look believable, for sure. Mm-hmm. The more information you have on it, the better. Salary is a game changer, putting salary ranges on your jobs, putting any sort of labels you can on your job. Make sure your Indeed company page is updated, because people will click into that and see, it's like, okay, who is this company? People like to research jobs like that. So that's just some things that come to mind when you brought up that question.
No, that's all really great advice. So interesting thing. So as you get into Indeed and things mm-hmm. people know they don't know, there's a lot of things that are really kind of like Indeed mythology out there. So let's talk about a couple of these. One, okay. Refreshing my jobs, is that a myth or not?
Yes and no. So if you're just doing organic posting all by themselves, obviously, there's some truth to that, because Indeed is just going to think that, oh, that job closed, you put up a new one, so let's put it up to the top of the feed, and then it's going to drop down in the feed over time. I would not do that for sponsored ads, though, and it's a very good reason for it is the ads take time to learn. And that's going to be in like any marketing situation. I know we had this before back when we did display advertising, for example. Put it up for some time. Don't make changes right away, because it does take time for the system to do its thing, to see adjust the budgets, adjust their bids, because Indeed is bidding on your behalf. So they have to see what the competition is out, how much budget this job is actually going to need. And then as you progress, like we actually see it in the number of applies over time, when it's going to start out with a lot of applies and it's going to drop down at first. And then that's when people get worried, like, oh, there's no more applies, let's refresh the job. No, just wait. It's going to go back. It goes back up, and it goes like that as a wave. And we've had jobs up for, these evergreen positions up for long months at a time. And, we're still getting the normal amount of traffic as long as you're responding to your candidates. I would still refresh them as well, like once a month or so, because it does say that this job was posted like 30 days ago or something. So if a job seeker sees that this job was posted 3 months ago, like, okay, maybe they aren't hiring that for that position or something, or they forgot about it, so I'm not going to apply. So that's another part of the whole make your jobs believable principle there.
Okay, so we just got through this whole thing. So on one hand, it's okay to go ahead and refresh those organic jobs. You don't want to do it too often, but you do want to do it often enough they look fresh. And as far as the sponsor jobs, what you're saying here is hands off, put them up there, leave them up there, let the algorithm do its thing before you start adjusting them. So how often is too often when it comes to refreshing a job on Indeed?
I've heard some crazy stories where people are going in like every other day and, taking jobs down, putting them back up, putting in budgets back up and everything. That sounds just crazy because you're you're losing a lot of time just putting jobs up and down and trying to adjust budgets to make sure they fit into the campaign. I mean, if we like, that would be impossible for us to do because like it already takes a day just for the feed to get indexed by Indeed and everything. So, let's try not to do that. That sounds like you're focusing on the wrong part of your recruiting funnel. There's so many other things you could work on there.
Well, and the other thing is if you refresh those jobs too often, Indeed's quality team can and will flag the job and
Yes.
it'll stop distribution.
I mean, just look at it from Indeed's point of view. It's like, what incentive do they have for people to be refreshing jobs every other day? It's going to be a quality issue with their content for sure. And so that's the type of thing that their quality team is going to go after. I don't know exactly, like internally, like what that looks like, what type of what type of rules they're putting down to try to stomp that out. But I would not be surprised if that's a thing that they do not want to try to incentivize.
Yeah, I think they if you refresh too often, what happens is your jobs kind of get shadow banned, and you think they're working, but they're just not getting any traffic, right?
Yeah, no, that happens.
So let's talk about another myth that we hear a lot, and this is something that comes up almost every time we bring on a new customer, and they're not getting enough applicants for their job. I think the myth out there is if I don't put a salary on my job, I'm not going to set an expectation with the candidate and it's easier to recruit them. What happens when you don't put a salary on your job?
Oh, yeah, we know that very well because Indeed's still going to put a salary on your job and it's going to be the wrong one. That's what's going to happen. Every job board, LinkedIn, Indeed, they have the incentive to put that salary on the job because it's going to increase the click-through rate. So if you don't provide your own salary, they're going to make an estimate and they're going to compare it to
when you don't put the salary on the job, right?
Mm-hmm.
There's less clicks on that job ad. And I've seen numbers out there from like 14% to 28% difference. So if you put the salary on there, you get like 28% more clicks. And what you're telling me is that the job boards they know that. And so if you don't give them a salary, they're going to find a salary from somewhere and show it in the job ad.
Yep.
What does that look like when they do that? Is it like they put a fake salary in there or they do something else?
It's I don't have a screenshot with me right now or anything, but it says like underneath the job title, it'll say like, oh, 50 to 65K, and next to it, it would say like Indeed estimate, but it'd be like an abbreviated, so you couldn't even tell. And we've got several clients come to us and say, hey, why did you put the wrong salary on my job? It's saying 50 to 65K, but that's not correct. It's, it could be lower or higher or anything, but it's like, we didn't put that on there. You didn't put it on there. Indeed put it on there because you didn't provide a salary. So it's like either we got to put in a ticket to see it's like, okay, let's take off that Indeed estimate thing, or just put up a salary. Because if you look at your other 4 competitors in the same feed, in the same list, they all have their salaries on there. So that's what people.
And really what you're saying is putting the salary on the job is a good idea because you get more applies, right?
Yeah, you get more applies. That's the way it is. And obviously not every employer is going to have the highest salary. So there's like another sort of difficult space there to navigate. It's like, what if I'm the employer who, out of these 4 employers, who pays least? There's always going to be that one employer who pays least. There's always going to be the one employer who pays more. So if you're on that bottom rung, you can still use a range at least, even though it might be a bit skewed to one end or the other. It's just very rarely would I ever advise not putting it on.
Okay, so other myths. I see a lot of job ads out there that really go out of their way to be overtly salesy. Like they're like coming up with very creative ways to describe everything. How well do those work?
You do have to be careful on Indeed with job titles. So if anything's in the title that's not part of a job title, it will get banned, shadow banned by the quality group. Because, for example, you can't put numbers with like pay or bonuses or things like that. So even though it might look really good to say, you know, retail manager, $5,000 sign-on bonus in your job title, you can't do that on Indeed. It won't get approved. Or I think it's like it will get sponsored visibility, but not organic visibility or something like that. So
So you'll have to pay for all the traffic. And the thing that happens when you do that and you get shadow banned is just basically it looks like everything is working, but you're getting no candidates.
yeah, I don't know if exactly how the employer interface works, if they do tell you if like jobs not shown or not. So I think it shows on the agency side, or it doesn't sometimes. So you do have to look up. It's like, okay, are my job's actually showing? That's another thing with reverse searching jobs. That's a tricky business because remember, if you're looking up your own positions, Indeed is thinking that you're a job seeker who wants to apply to those positions. But let's say if you're looking at your job every hour, Indeed is thinking, oh, this job seeker is coming to this job a lot. A lot of job seekers are coming to this job, but they're not applying to it. So it must be a bad job or something. So
We're not
that's why
going to
you have
show
to.
it.
So we're not going to show
So
this
you're
job to
saying
them
I can look
anymore.
at my job. I can look at my job too much as an employer, and then I'm going to shoot myself in the foot. Nobody's going to see it.
Well, it's like that. I've heard that from the Indeed team. It's like careful with your reverse searching because if you visit a job 10 times but you don't apply to it, it's like why would Indeed want to show that to you again? And then you're going to start thinking that your job's not showing on Indeed anymore. So I've always found easiest is this is a nice little tip. If you want to look up the jobs for a company, instead of trying to go through the normal search bar, go to company reviews at the top, look for your company, then go to your company page, and then look for the jobs on your company page. And then, if you want that, you're going to get a complete list of all your openings and which ones are getting sort of like the organic visibility rather than trying to go through the normal search engine. Now, you can always try to look up jobs in an incognito tab for sure. Just, if you want to type in, okay, what's the traffic like for a retail manager in this city? Yeah, go ahead, test that out, see who the big employers are, see what they're posting for job titles. And that's where I get like a lot of inspiration for, okay, let's try out this other job title. Let's make sure we have this salary range or something and things like that.
Yeah. That's good advice. So one more question here on Indeed.
Mm-hmm.
So, and this is probably one of the most misunderstood things. So Indeed has a feature called Indeed Apply, and if you look at other job boards, they all have their own. I think the industry we call it native apply, right?
Yeah.
But they all have one. So most companies that have a career site like to take the application on the career site. What works better, native applies or apply on your career site?
Native apply 100%. I mean, think about it. It's like what's going to get the candidate quickest into your funnel? It's going to be the native apply. They're not leaving to go to a separate page, and they don't have to create another account. Even like some of these ATSs like Workday and everything, you can go to the ATS, but then you have to create another account in order to log in. And when you're applying to like 5-6 jobs, and let's say all these 6 employers, they all use Workday, you're going to have to create 6 different Workday accounts in order to apply for these 6 different positions. So why do that when you can just have Indeed apply and use your one Indeed account to apply to all 6 positions? So Indeed has every incentive for employers to use Indeed apply. And then you have, as an employer, every incentive also to use Indeed native apply because you're going to be getting more people. It's going to be much easier to apply to your position and get them into the door, so to say.
Right. So, kind of looking at this whole thing with ATS apply on my career site versus Indeed apply.
Mm-hmm.
So if I make the jump from apply on my career site to Indeed apply or native apply on the job board, how many more candidates can I expect to get, Dominic?
A lot more for sure. You're going to be expecting 23%. I think is the industry number for how many more applies you're going to be getting. And we see it too. We've had clients switch from going from their ATS, redirect applies to instead going through an Indeed native apply and then screening candidates from there and then inviting them to apply to do that, 20, 30 step application. And it's always it's going to be a big lift. I mean, 70% or more, 72%, I think is the number of applies are on mobile. So in a lot of ATS, as we know, they're not mobile friendly. So even if the company is mobile friendly, they still have, 10, 15 steps that the person is going to have to fill out. Like how many people actually have resumes on their phones anymore that they can upload and stuff like that. So you have to really think like, okay, do I want to make the experience as easy as possible to get into the door? And then after that, do your screening, invite them to apply, and don't get married on the first date, as we like to say.
Yeah, and I think that kind of leads to something really, really important, which is this. When people are doing that first apply,
Mm-hmm.
that's your opportunity to engage. That's when you have the chance to talk to a candidate and get them interested in your company and sell them on the opportunity. And in today's market, if you're not selling the candidate on the opportunity that you have, and you're just going, okay, apply, screen, and then we're going to call you back, you're going to lose the vast majority of great candidates because they're just not going to wait around for your process.
No, I mean, everyone's timing is different too. The company's timing to make a hire is not the same as the candidate's time to get a job. They could be looking for a job within a week. They could be waiting a month. But so if you're waiting, where did I hear? It was like a Talru that came out with a report last week. The average time to fill a position for entry-level positions was 44 days. If you're taking 44 days to fill a position, you got to think about, candidates are not waiting 44 days to get a job. If they got laid off, they got bills to pay,
Yeah, well, we're routinely helping clients hire those exact positions in sometimes 2 and 3 days. That's between when the job goes up and when the hire is made. In fact, we just, our latest candidate development rep hire that we did for our own company, she applied on a Friday and was hired on Tuesday.
Yes.
I mean, there's no reason you have to go that slow. And if you are going that slow, the best candidates are going to take a job somewhere else, and you're going to be picking from the bottom of the barrel.
Mm-hmm. And that's going to take a whole change in just the philosophy of recruiting. I know that because this brings into the whole conversation of the relationship between the recruiter and the hiring manager and expectations and, sending candidates back and forth from the ATS to the recruiter, to the hiring manager, back to the recruiter. So you have to really think of like, okay, where can we make it faster there? Where can we narrow down the decision process so you're not having 4 different people interviewing, 5 candidates for an entry-level position? It's just not necessary anymore.
Yeah, well, there's a really big underlying principle to all this stuff, and this is kind of like the best kept secret in recruiting, and that's that even in today's market, 90% of candidates are going to take the very first job that they're offered. Yes. And so if you look at how to win in recruiting, it's really simple. You learn to go faster so that you can pick first. I mean, that's really the whole idea here is let's go faster so that the best talent's still available. And the job market isn't going to get less competitive over the next few years. It's going to continue to be this way. And so it really is incumbent, if you on you as a business leader at your company to go look at what you're doing today and go, hey, I think we need to change how we're recruiting. This 44 days to make an entry-level hire is not going to work. It's not going to be sustainable. It's going to lead to us being short-staffed. It's going to lead to us missing orders. It's going to cost us a lot of money. And ultimately, I don't want to be melodramatic or anything, but, if you sustainably don't make hires over time, eventually you will be acquired or go out of business.
Yep. I mean, that's what it is. If you have an open position, you're losing revenue on that position. So yeah, that's when you think of your cost per hire. I think that in the same report, they also said the average cost per hire was like $670 or something. And I think that's a bit of a low number, because when you take into account, first of all, the advertising for the position, you're spending $300 to $400 per job. You have to look at the time spent. Like, some companies, they love to throw lots of people into the interview process, and like that's man hours.
I've seen interviews that cost $600, $700 just on the
just
time
for the 1 hour.
The managers that are in the room for 2 hours.
Yes, that, and then you're looking at what's your opportunity cost for the that position that's not being filled. You know, that's a mechanic that could have serviced 4 cars today or something. Every day you wait to get that position filled. So you're looking at thousands by then of your cost per hire.
So, just kind of wrap things up for at least this part of our conversation, if you are out there and you want to talk to Dominic and you want to learn more about, how to better get control of that recruitment ad spend, and if you're spending over $1,000, probably under about $15,000 a month, really go to pivotcx.io and hit the contact us button and ask about recruitment advertising. Tell us a little bit about what the budget is that you've got and what you think might be wrong. And we'll see if we can't get you into a conversation with Dominic or somebody like Dominic who can really take a look at that and help you get a better sense of what's really happening there, so we can get this this fixed. So Dominic, just a few last things, and I always ask everybody that comes on Pivot2First these questions. So what's what's your favorite book?
My favorite book, just any book, fiction, it's okay.
Sure.
It doesn't have to be a business book. I'll give a nonfiction and a fiction book. So nonfiction, for sure. Business book, the one that's really affected how I think is 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, Stephen Covey, classic book. I read that in high school, and a lot of my high school friends read it, and we thought, like, wow, this is the greatest stuff ever. And I still think of a lot of those principles nowadays. I already used one of them, which was, I started out with, like, keep the goal in mind, keep the end in mind. Another one I love is, like, create win-win situations, stuff like that, you just think out throughout the day. One fiction book I really loved reading lately, East of Eden by John Steinbeck. It's a classic American novel from the 1950s, or I'm not exactly the exact timeline there, but it was a longer book, 800, 900 pages or so, but it was quite the adventure to read. Definitely an amazing study into the human person, really.
Favorite movie?
Lord of the Rings, #1. Definitely up there. The original trilogy. I feel like whenever I watch a movie, I'm always just comparing it to, okay, it wasn't like Lord of the Rings, but it was okay. I was like, oh, it was close to Lord of the Rings. That's when I know that, okay, that's my #1 movie.
Okay, and is there anything else you want to share with the audience?
You ended with, let's get a conversation going about your recruitment marketing. I think that's the best way to start understanding these things. I talk with recruiters every day, all day, and a lot of the times they just need someone to bounce ideas off of. They just need to understand better how everything works. Because you got these recruiters, they might be amazing on the one-to-one interviews and the conversations, but they don't quite have an overarching idea of, what's the big picture with job board advertising and all this other stuff. And they feel a bit overwhelmed. So we definitely want to, help you out there. Get you a handle on your advertising, and in the end, help you make more hires.
All right, Dominic, thank you so much for being with us today. And for everybody else out there, hope you have a great day today.
Thank you, Mike.